Chapters 1, 2, and into chapter 3 are one story. And it's not a tough story, but it's actually a nice story. We've had a lot of kind of negatives. This one is a lot lighter in some respects. It's a part of a series that I called, when I was teaching it last, Lessons from the Bench. And what I mean is that some lessons are only learned while you're watching the other players play, but you're benched. Saul may be dead, but David's not yet king. It's not yet. He's still in a waiting pattern. He's still gaining, but more waiting is still necessary. One of the things you have to ask when you read the book of Samuel, 1st and 2nd Samuel, you start asking yourself, how long will it take for David to finally get to be king? Because years go past, and it's still like, it's like a tea bag in hot water. I mean, it's a slow steeping process, and you're going, oh, come on, just be king already. It's been since chapter 16 of 1 Samuel. We are now all the way into 2 Samuel 1. He's still not king, and he's not going to be yet. So here's something I want you to see. Even when God has a great plan for you, and guys, many of you are right here. Even when God has a great plan for you, you may not experience it until God has fully prepared it for you and until you're fully ready for it. There's a reason why you're not in the end point of where you're going to be in your accomplishments in ministry for God. And it's because you're not ready and it's not ready. God gets the room ready while he gets you ready. I know this sounds stupid, but he's growing your spouse at the same time he's growing you. You just haven't met them yet, perhaps. And as a result, it could well be that why haven't I met him yet? Because he's not ready. She's not ready to meet you. You wouldn't like them the way they are now. You will when they're fully cooked. Wait till the little thing pops out, okay? It's like, you can look at you sit there in front of the oven, but until the little thing pops out, it isn't done yet. Okay, now, go to the beginning of 2 Samuel and verses 1 through 12. I want you to see that there are some lessons that we get. And the first one is we have to learn to deal with obedience from God's command. It's ironic to me that an Amalekite took Saul's life. In verse 1 through 12, you end up with this: after the death of Saul, David returned from the slaughter of the Amalekites, and he remained at Ziklag. On the third day, behold, a man came from the camp of Saul, his clothes torn, dust on his head. And it came about, when he came to David, he fell to the ground and prostrated himself. David said, from where have you come? I've escaped from the camp of Israel. How did things go? Please tell me. The people have fled from the battle, and many of the people have fallen and are dead. Jonathan and Saul are dead also. David said to the young man, how do you know that Saul and his son Jonathan are dead? And this is where the man goes off the rails. The young man said, by chance I happened on Mount Gilboa, and behold, Saul was leaning on a spear, and behold, his chariots and the horsemen pursued him closely. When he looked behind him, he saw me, and he called to me. I said, here I am. And he said to me, who are you? I answered, I'm an Amalekite. And he said to me, please stand beside me and kill me, for agony has seized me, because my life still lingers in me. So I stood beside him, and I killed him, because I knew that he could not live after he had fallen. I took the crown which was on his head, the bracelet which was on his arm, and I brought them here to my Lord. Then David took hold of his clothes, and he tore them, so also did the men who were with him. They mourned and wept and fasted until evening for Saul and for Jonathan and for the people of the Lord of the house of Israel, because they had fallen by the sword. David said to the young man who answered him, where are you from? And he answered, I am a son of an alien, an Amalekite. And David said to him, how is it that you are not afraid to stretch out your hand to destroy the Lord's anointed? And David called one of the young men and said, go, cut him down. So he struck him, and he died. David said to him, your blood is on your head, for your mouth has testified against you, saying, I have killed the Lord's anointed. One of the things that happens in the beginning is the lesson observed by Saul's life is you have to when you're sitting on the bench and you're learning to be what God wants you to be, watch what God is doing in the people that are doing it now. David isn't yet king, but the pattern for the king is Saul. And David picks out in Saul's life what Saul was and what Saul wasn't, what Saul did and what Saul didn't do. That's too many words. Let me see if I can get it this way. While God is sculpting you to be whatever you're going to be, watch the people who are doing it now. Decide which are doing it the way you think it should be done and the ones that are not. Not to vocalize it or blog it, but to learn it. To decide in your own heart, these are methods I think work, these are ones I would never try. These are things that make sense to me, these are things that I don't think that they should be involved in. Watch the mistakes of those who are doing it now so that when it's your turn to pick up a spear and it's your turn to put on a crown, you know what to do. So the first 12 verses really sort of play out. As the man comes and shares with David what happened, David can see the effect to Saul's cause, the end of what Saul was. Ask yourself this question. Have you watched long enough to see who produced what you want to produce and who didn't? Because it seems to me one of the problems with being a teenager is we get into the place in our teen years where we lose track of who's really going where we want to go. We get other people that are our peers, but they haven't done it yet. They may have some sage advice, but they haven't done it yet. Pick the mom who's a mom the way you want to be a mom. And then start asking yourself, before God gives you a baby in the womb, what kind of mom? I want to be that kind of mom. I want to do it that way. And start asking yourself, how do they do what they do and why is it successful? I'm not saying just be them. There are things you're going to go, and that's not the way I'm going to do that. And that's not the way I'm going to do that. But start using your mind to process how is it being done. The first 12 verses to me are a lesson of observation. David has the chance from the bench to watch a king be king and be a king badly. So here's a great warning. Not everything is about just criticizing the people that go before you. And not everything is about just falling down and worshiping the people that go before you. You got to make up your mind. Some of you, if God calls you to preach, then walk in here on Sunday, be merciful to me, but in your mind decide, yeah, that didn't work. I wouldn't try that. That's fine with me. My expectation is that you'll learn from it. It doesn't matter what area. There's a reason God modeled us to be needful of parents, because we watch other people in relationships. And before we're even at kindergarten the first time, we've learned relationships in our home. Okay, when you get to verses 14 and 15 and 16, one of the things you need to learn is the lesson of sticking to your principles, even when abandoning truth for a season might be to a great advantage. Look at verse 14. What's the principle of verse 14, or what's the truth behind it that David grabs onto, that he goes back to, that he's had in his own life? You don't disrespect the office by killing the person. You don't do that. And David has had chances on 2 occasions with a spear and with a tassel to do it. And in both times, he respected the office. And now he's standing in front of somebody who's bragging about doing it. We don't know if the guy actually did this. We don't know if he made this story up, and it's an additional story to the end of of chapter 31 of 1 Samuel. All we know is that he's standing there bragging about doing something, and David goes back to his principles. Even if David is going to receive the crown, it's still not a good reason to reverse your principles. Just because it's going to benefit you doesn't mean you abandon your principles. The other thing I notice is in verse 17, it says, David chanted with his lament over Saul and Jonathan his son, and he told them to teach the sons of Judah the song of the bow. Behold, it is written in the book of Jasher. And by the way, we don't have the book of Jasher. This is one of many books referred to in the scriptures that we don't any longer have. But apparently it's a poetry book. And what you see is this. David stops and sings a song, the song for Saul. Now, Stop for a second and ask yourself, what is the lesson behind that? Okay, so he stops and he sings a song about Saul. And he sings a song about God's use of the king before him. And he does it from all the way down to verse 27. You can go down through and you can talk about Saul and Jonathan and the household of the king. It occurs to me that one of the strongest lessons that if you were to breathe this in, you would come up with, David saw himself, he honored the people that went before him that did what they did, so that before he was ready to be that guy, he had to honor that guy. It was necessary in his own mind. You know, we're quick to point out the people's mistakes. Listen to me very carefully, because it's late in the day and you're liable to miss this, but it's important. If God gives you a position and you're following somebody else, be careful not to criticize the person who had the job before you. You will be sorely tempted to do so. You will think that one of the ways to raise the stock in you is to put down the person who had the job before you. I have followed a series of pastors. I have learned a lesson. Don't criticize the people that went before you. You don't know what they were going through. You have no idea what else was weighing on them. And it's easy for you to think that they were in a situation that's exactly your situation because you have the same job. But what you don't know is where they were at in their mind space and what was going on in their life. It's like I said about Abigail. You'd look at her and you'd think she's rich and she's shapely, she must be having a good life, and she was living a lousy, miserable life. From the outside, things don't always look the way they really are. I think that David grabbed onto this and instead of applying himself, look, can we all agree that mourning for Jonathan makes easy sense? It's like the guy's best friend. How about mourning for Saul? I think he legitimately mourned for Saul like he mourned for Jonathan. And the difference was he saw the loss of a king for Israel, not just Saul for who he was. He saw it as bigger than it was. You know, it was interesting walking around Washington and just spending time in these rooms and these places where presidents and congressmen. I saw the director of the CIA the other day walking out of lunch. It was interesting. I mean, I'm from here to you, and here he comes walking out the door. Now, I follow enough politically to know who he was, so I said to my wife, I said, this is who this is. And then I looked him up on my phone and said, see? And she goes, oh yeah, that is him, you know? And we were like just standing there, and he's just like waving, waiting for his car to come up, because they get these big, long cars and whatever. Walking around in that environment, you know, we talk about people in the news like an abstraction. We treat the president like an abstraction. These are people. They get up in the morning and put their socks on just like you do. They, some days, don't feel well. Not every day they're, you know, all awake. Some days they have a headache sitting through a national security meeting. A lot rides on their decisions, but we make them like cardboard cutouts and not like people. Here's what I read from David. Saul was a person, and Jonathan was a person. They were real people to me. I think until you pass into the frame where you understand that even people that everybody criticizes in the news are regular people, you somehow don't see them that way. I think it's good that David devised a song to sing about them, but something else. This is a funeral dirge. That's what it is. You know, a funeral dirge is something that you sing out, and after the mourning period, look at chapter 2, verse 1. What's the problem with David now? Think about it. Be David. Saul is dead. Jonathan is dead. You have worn out, old, crusty business cards that were printed up more than a dozen years ago as king-elect. What now? That's a problem, isn't it? So the next 4 verses are important. Then it came about afterwards that David inquired of the Lord, you think? Shall I go up to one of the cities of Judah? And the Lord said to him, go up. And so David said, where shall I go up? And God said, go to Hebron. So David went up there. His wives, Ahinoam, Abigail, David brought up his men who were with him, each of his household, and they lived in the cities of Hebron. And then the men of Judah came and appointed David king over the house of Judah. Here's what I love. You don't just simply follow the circumstances and put on Saul's armor and go marching around like you're king. Why should God hear any less from you when things appear to be breaking open and you just got the new job than he did when you were unemployed? Why is it so obvious to us that we should seek God when we're unemployed, but when we landed the big job, all of a sudden God shouldn't hear anything for a while? Because he knows we're busy now. Think about it. The first thing he does is he stops and says, God, I need your direction. John Piper in his Let the Nations Be Glad said this. He said, life is war. That's not all it is, but it is always that. Our weakness in prayer is owing largely to our neglect of this truth. Prayer is primarily a wartime walkie-talkie for the mission of the church as it advances against the powers of darkness and unbelief. It is not surprising that prayer malfunctions when we try to make it a domestic intercom to call upstairs for more comforts in the den. God has given us prayer as a wartime walkie-talkie so that we can call headquarters for everything we need as the kingdom of Christ advances in the world. Prayer gives us the significance of frontline forces and gives God the glory of limitless provider. The one who gives the power gets the glory. I love that line. Thus, prayer safeguards the supremacy of God in missions while linking us with endless grace for every need. The one line I just love, the one who gives the power gets the glory. I think when we don't pray, we accept glory for what happens. And when we pray, the one who gave the power gets the glory. I think that's one of the interesting kind of spins on what happens in the first 4 verses. Look at verses 5, 6, and 7. It says, David sent messengers to men of Jabesh of Gilead and said to them, may you be blessed of the Lord because you have shown the kindness to Saul your Lord and have buried him. Now may the Lord show loving kindness and truth to you, and I also show this goodness to you because you have done this thing. Now therefore let your hands be strong and be valiant, for Saul your Lord is dead, and also the house of Judah has anointed me king over them. Do you notice what he does? He doesn't presume he's king over anybody but Judah. All he is king of one county in the south. But what he says is, good job, guys. Great work up there taking down the body of our king Saul. Here's what he does. When you take on a new work, don't try to control the loyalties of the people around you. Don't do it. What he does is he applauds them for being loyal to his predecessor and tells them, informs them of the position God's given, but does not ask them for anything. It's always wise not to presume that you can make other people loyal. I find this all the time. Look, in ministry, you will build teams and find out some of your best team players will end up somewhere else. That is what happens. Early in my ministry, that hurt. Can I tell you that honestly? Early in the ministry, that hurt. I would work hard with somebody, spend 5 years training them, and the next thing I know, they would be, jetting off to some other place. And my heart would break because I'd be thinking, I poured so much into you. It was really several years into it before I started to understand. I'm not pouring it into you so that you can work here so that I can look good, because that's not a ministry to you, that's a ministry to me. Turn it around. I get to be in your life for as long as you let me. And so I just want to do with it everything I promised you I would do. That's it. What do you owe me for doing that? Nothing. Because you don't work for me, you work for Jesus. What do you owe him for everything? Everything. So give that to him and I'll be happy. And take yourself out of the equation, because when you put yourself there, you're in a place you don't belong. You start thinking you own people's loyalties when you don't. Notice what he does. In verses 8 to 32, I think it's really interesting as the story plays out. Abner, son of Ner, commander of Saul's army, had taken Ishbosheth, the son of Saul, and brought him over to Mahanaim. Mahanaim is on the other side of the Jordan, and it's the twin camps. Where have you seen this before? What's that? In Genesis, yes. The twin camps. Jacob, when he was coming back to see Esau, and the twin camps. So essentially, the successor of Saul technically was who? Saul's son, Ishbosheth. Now, God hadn't given any direction on who would be the successor except for David. That's who Saul was told. That's who Samuel was told. The question is, how many other people knew that? Only Jesse? I mean, here's the thing. Your dad can't make you king. And by this time, by the way, Jesse's probably long dead. Saul's dead. Samuel's dead. So it looks like David has this enormous temptation to go and take what God had said was his. But that's not what he does. In fact, what happens is kind of interesting. Now, Ish is the word man. Ish, I-S-H, Ish. Boshet is the word shame or humiliation. Ish Boshet is the man of humiliation or man of shame. I don't know exactly what happened in his life to that point, but something gave him a lousy name. Hi, I'm man of humiliation. Okay? This is not a name you want, okay? But he made him king over Gilead, over the Asherites, over Jezreel, over Ephraim, over Benjamin, even over all Israel, meaning the northern part of Israel. Ishbosheth, Saul's son, was 40 years old when he became king over Israel, and he was king for 2 years. The house of Judah, however, followed David. Notice something that Christians often forget. The first king of Israel was Saul. The second king was Ishbosheth. The third king of Israel was David. The fourth king was Solomon. Okay? Ishbosheth ruled for 2 years while David ruled only in Judah. And what's important is, do you remember later on after Solomon dies that they split Israel from Judah? They started split, put it together, and then split again. In other words, this thing started as 2 nations, not one. All Jews, but not all Judeans. Judeans in the south, Israelites in the north, and a confederation of 12 tribes. 2 tribes were David's, the tribe that belonged to Caleb, the Simeonites, and the Judahites. Simeon and Judah kind of amalgamated into one. So David has Judah, Simeon. All the other 10 tribes are under Ishbosheth. And it says the time that David was king in Hebron over the house of Judah was 7 years and 6 months. So the first 7 years, 6 months, David is only getting part of this. Now, here's the point. David has been waiting a long time to be what God wants him to be. And now that he has part of the country, he still doesn't have the rest. And it's almost getting ridiculous. I mean, come on, is this not like, oh, come on now, Saul is dead. Why in the world do I have to go through this Ishbosheth thing? Well, the war has to play out between the joint chiefs of staff. Let's put it that way. You've got 2 different groups of people, and each of them has their own understanding of who's going to be in charge. You have the men that belong to Ishbosheth and the men that belong to David. Watch what happens in verse 12. Now Abner, son of Ner, went out from Mahanaim to Gibeon with the servants of Ishbosheth, the son of Saul. And Joab, the son of Zeruiah, and the servants of David went out and met them by the pool of Gibeon. And they sat down, one on one side of the pool and the other on the other side of the pool. One of the really cool things is archaeologically that pool has been found. You can actually sit there on the edges of the pool. So it's been found and dug up, and that's just one of the cool things you get to do. Abner said to Joab, now let the young men arise and hold a contest before us. And Joab said, let them arise. So they arose and went over by count, 12 for Benjamin and Ishbosheth, the son of Saul, and 12 for the servants of David. Each of them seized his opponent by the head and thrust his sword in his opponent's side, so they fell down together. Therefore the place was called Chelkat Chazorim. Now that's a mouthful, but something is going to play out with the words here. So just hang on till we get to the words, which is Gibeon. That day the battle was very severe, and Abner and the son of Israel were beaten before the servants of David. Now, the three sons of Zeruiah were Joab, Abishai, and Asahel. And Asahel was as swift-footed as one of the gazelles which is in the field. All we know is the guy's a really quick runner, okay? And verse 19, Asahel pursued Abner and did not turn to the right or to the left when following Abner. Abner looked behind him and said, "Is that you, Asahel?" And he answered, "It is I." So Abner said to him, "Turn to your right or to your left and take hold of one of your young men for yourself, and take for yourself his spoil." But Asahel was not willing to turn aside from following him. What's going on? Abner is in charge of Saul's army. What does that tell you about his relative age? He's a good bit older than this younger man who's outpacing him in the run. So Abner's trying to talk his way out of the fact that this younger man can chase him down, ostensibly to kill him, right? So what does he do? He says, "Listen, go after anybody you want. There's a whole bunch of spoils out here. Take anything you want. I don't care whose you take. You can have whatever you want." The problem is, Asahel's not buying it. He keeps chasing him. Abner is older. He's strong. He's mighty, but he's tired. So he says, Abner repeated to him again, "Turn aside from following me. Why should I strike you to the ground? How then could I lift up my face to your brother Joab?" However, he refused to turn aside. Therefore, Abner struck him in the belly with the butt end of the spear, so that the spear came out of his back. He fell there and died on the spot. And it came about that all who came to the place where Asahel had fallen and died stood still. Here's the thing. This young guy was energetic and zealous, but over his head. He wasn't smart enough to back off. So Abner kept saying to him, "Listen, buddy, back off or you're dead. If you don't back off, I'm going to have to kill you. I don't want to kill you. I like your family. You're nice people. Why should I have to kill you?" The kid kept coming. So what did he do? He killed him. Now it says, Joab and Abishai pursued Abner. And when the sun was going down, they came to the hill of Ammah, which is in front of Kia, by the way of the wilderness of Gibeon. The sons of Benjamin gathered together behind Abner and became one band, and they stood at the top of a certain hill. Then Abner called to Joab and said, "Shall the sword devour forever? Do you not know that it will be bitter in the end? How long will you refrain from telling the people to turn back from following their brothers?" Joab said to him, "As God lives, if you had not spoken, surely then the people would not have gone away in the morning, each from following his brother." So Joab blew the trumpet, and all the people halted, pursued Israel no longer, nor did they continue to fight anymore. Abner and his men then went through the Arava all night. So they crossed the Jordan, walked all morning, came to Mahanaim. Then Joab returned from following Abner. And when he had gathered all the people together, 19 of David's servants beside Asahel were missing. But the servants of David had struck down many of Benjamin and Abner's men, so that 360 men died. And they took up Asahel and buried him in his father's tomb, which is in Bethlehem. Then Joab and his men went all night until the day dawned at Hebron. Here's what happens. David's got a problem. His problem is he can't possibly keep a handle on these guys. You got a bunch of guys who want to fight, and you're not going to stop them from fighting. They're like a bunch of junior hires, so he's trying desperately to keep control of this. David, as he rises, gets himself into a situation where all of a sudden his men go taking off, and they decide to meet together with the men of Ishbosheth. David did not tell them to do this. This is all happening, but isn't it a scandal? I mean, let's face it. There's going to be a huge scandal that's going to play out right in front of David's administration. He's not even fully king, and they're already creating a scandal. What is David learning? This is what's happening to candidates who are running for president right now. Somebody who's a press spokesman says something stupid, and now it's tagged to the candidate, and the candidate never said it. What's happening is people are playing out their fight. And it's not between Ishbosheth and David. It's between their men. People are Here's what you need to know. As a leader, there will be people around you who think they're going to help you be a better leader by somehow taking up your cause and fighting for you. Here's the problem. This is going to look like a civil war, and it's going to look like David started it, and David was nowhere on the scene. This is going to look like, you know why it's going to look like David? Why is he going to get tagged with it? Why isn't Ishbosheth going to get tagged with this? Because he won. Sometimes the best way in politics to lose is to win. Because when you lose, they stop talking about you, but when you win, you're in the office, so they just keep going after you. Here's the problem. They also went and they sort of cheated. David's men went down there like they were going to wrestle, pulled out knives, and killed them all. Okay? David never told them to do it. Now, here's the bottom line. Getting the job is one thing. Building unity is another. Expect people to chew on differences and real leaders to knit them together. I'm saying something that I intend for you to hear with open ears. Expect that everybody will highlight what's different between us, and the leader will draw people together. David is worried about things nobody else is worried about. David is worried about whether or not he can hold the kingdom together, put it together. And he's trying to put it together with baling wire, and they're out, these yahoos are out there killing each other. This is going to follow David. And later on, we're going to walk through some time where you're going to find that David will be haunted by this. It's one thing to say you're king, it's another thing to get control over your own people. It's one thing to be called the leader, it's another thing to lead. Leadership is when you actually get the people who are following you to follow you, not when you get the title. So, if I have one thing I can say about this chapter, it would be this. He was getting the title, but not the leadership yet. That didn't come yet. And often you get the title first, but you don't get the authority till later. And in the gap between the time you get the title and the time you get the authority, people who really want to push other people around do. That's often a time when key abuses occur.